Can you hear me? Loud enough? All right. Nice work. Tonight, it looks a little different, doesn't it? I had somebody tell me when they walked in, they're like, I was caught off guard. I hope tonight you were caught off guard a little bit because that was the intent. Can I coach you for a second? I'm not very athletic, or I pretend like I am, but let me try to be a coach for a second, like your athletes preparing for something. What I want you to do is be prepared not to look at your peers tonight leading you in worship. The whole point of tonight was to move the band off the platform so that people would not be the focus. By the way, they're never the focus, but when they're standing up here and there's lights on them and they're up higher than you, that can unintentionally happen sometimes. So it's really cool. I got to dream with Aston and Brody about tonight, and we thought this would be a great idea. Now, here's what's so great is Liturgical does it all the time, but hey, we cheated and went to the left instead of to the right? So here's what we're going to do tonight. You're going to get to hear Pastor Janet tonight. You're going to get to hear me talk about Psalm 139 a little bit. You got 2 different videos. You got 6 songs weaving in and out. I straight up know you guys are exhausted. How many people are exhausted, burnt out, and overwhelmed? All right? So here's what I hope. I hope tonight will be a little bit of an exhale for you, all right? So everybody stand up. And here's what I want you to do real quick with me. Hi, wife. My wife's here tonight. I like that. Yeah. Here's what I want you to do tonight. By the way, Aston and Brody and Aston, thank you so much for planning something a little bit different tonight. We like it. Thank you. Do this. Close your eyes. And I want you to breathe in and breathe out like 5 slow times. And don't do it so loud that people are looking at you awkward around you. But just try to quiet your heart and soul for a second. And then why don't you be worship leaders tonight? Because there are no worship leaders on the platform. And after breathing in and breathing out 5 times, why don't you say, God, meet us here. Use the plural. God, meet us here. Aston and Brody, after about 5 breaths and after you yourselves have had a chance to pray quietly to God, meet us here. Why don't you start leading us? Sound good? God, may you be glorified as we breathe in and breathe out. Fill our lungs with oxygen, hope, love, joy, peace. And God, help us to breathe once again. You guys are only a week and a half away from Thanksgiving break. How good does that feel? I'm only a week and a half away from Thanksgiving break. Life is good. This is the 12th Kaleo. You guys have been showing up. There are only 2 more after this week before Christmas break. It's kind of crazy, right? So here's what I want to do. Do me a favor. Will you do a camera shot where you go back a little bit further? I want to get all these signs because we got friends in the back and they don't always get to see everything. So just zoom back. Come on, keep going back. So you get all, yeah, I don't know who just did that, but thank you. All right. We've been in the Psalms, and let's see if anybody can remember this from week 1 and 2, and I've hinted at it a little bit more just occasionally. Where did we get this language from? There's an Old Testament theologian that came up with these 3 phrases. Anybody remember the first name? Ooh, David. No, David is the one that wrote a lot of the Psalms. But there's an Old Testament theologian that studied David. Does anybody know who the theologian was? Walter. Does anybody know his last name? Oh, nice. A couple of you just need a little bit of a hint, right? So, what was one of the... Oh, wait, where's my... Go back. Come on. Where's that thing? Go back. Yeah, there we go. What was one of the things that some of the Psalms fit into? Oh, that was so weak. Come on. What was one of the things that a lot of the Psalms fit into? Thank you. What else will the Psalms fit into sometimes? And finally? Perfect. You get this week and next week in the Psalms, and then we're moving into Advent and Christmas. Here's what's crazy. We have looked at 16 total Psalms over the last 12 weeks. Does anybody know how many Psalms are in the Old Testament? 150. Guess what you can do for the rest of your life? You can study a bunch of Psalms on your own, and you know how to categorize them. And you know how to think about which season of life you might be in and what God might do next and what might be possible. And it might help you not feel like you're crazy when you move from securely oriented to painfully disoriented to life's never going to change. Oh, wait a second, it did. Surprisingly reoriented. The Psalms have brought a language to my life, and I hope it's brought a language to your life where you can actually seek God. The Psalms are prayers for our lives. Without even preaching on all of them, because of this series, I find myself in the morning just going, I got a couple seconds. I'm going to read a psalm so I can be thinking about it as I drive into work today. They're the language that's trying to reorient how I see things, how I react to things, how I make decisions about things. And the Psalms have brought a different view to my life. I hope they have for yours as well. Tonight, Psalm 139, the second part. We're going to look at verses 5 through 12. The funniest thing is we're actually going to cover half the psalm last week, but we just focused in on the first part. And we had about 8 students up here. Thank you, those students that came up here. And they talked about all the different possible feelings and thoughts that God knows about. And it was pretty cool because they basically said over and over again, God, you know my thoughts, you know my depression, you know my excitement, you know my temptations, you know. And they started naming all these things. And last week we had this sense of, God, I got nothing to hide from you. You already know it anyways. And this week, we want to talk about the all-present God. We're talking about feelings and thoughts. This week, we want to focus in a little bit. We're going to do 2 other sections, but the first section is we want to talk about a God that is in all spaces. Not just some spaces, not just spaces that we think God's in, or not just spaces that we invite God in, but the all-present God in so many different spaces. And here's how I would describe tonight a little bit. It's going to feel more devotional to the sense of how will you engage, how will you enter into that space and be able to reflect on some of the things. I asked the Kaleo band when I was meeting with Aston and Brody this week and we were dreaming about stuff, is we're going to play 2 of quieter songs that you're going to remain seated tonight after we've read some of the Psalms for you to reflect on them. I've chosen some full screen photos that have no lower third words or sentences or phrases, just that hopefully the imagination of the Psalms and the imagination of a photo might make you ask the question, wait, could I escape God from there? Wait, is God void there? Is God present there? We want you to engage these thoughts and these spaces so that you can experience the all-present God. So do this. Listen to the first couple verses of Psalm 139, 5 through 8, and then I'm going to visually try to do something with you as you reflect on it. Psalm 139, verses 5 and 6, and then 7 and 8 say this: You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to the heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. I want you to reflect on some photos and some other language that others have used at different moments to try to say the same thing. Because I'm really curious. Can we go anywhere from your spirit, oh God? If we go up to the heavens, you are there. If we are fleeing from anything or anyone, you are there. If we are in the valley low, you are there. God, is there anywhere we can escape you? Is there any way we can ignore you? No. Thank God you are there. Can we run from you? No. Thank God you are there also. I don't know if images help you like they help me. I wish there would have been books the whole time I was growing up that was all pictures. I would have been a lot smarter. I don't know. I struggle with reading, spelling, writing, everything else. But those photos for me really start to make me imagine what are the spaces that I think God's not in. When things aren't going my way, when things are difficult. When I read this passage, it reminded me of a bunch of different spots that I've hidden out over the years. I'll give you one now, and if you steal it from me, I'll be really mad. But there's a sweet little spot just east of here. And if you go towards the freeway, there's this great little grease joint called Granburger. And if you go in there and get the most unhealthy thing possible, and you drive away from it and you go back behind some of the buildings that are down the street, there's this quiet little nook behind a very giant building that only has a dumpster, and I think the only thing that goes back there are dump trucks. And there's some days when I am so overwhelmed and so discouraged and there's no way out of the spot that I'm in that I'll just go sit, and doesn't just a greasy bag of fries and a big old giant Diet Coke solve everything? Not really. But you would be shocked how many times in that escape place, that running place, that I don't want to be around anybody and I don't want to remember any of my challenges, problems, decisions, choices, mistakes, that in sitting in that quiet place where I think I'm escaping and running and hiding, I actually end up seeing, hearing, experiencing, or knowing God different. And right now, if you're imagining, whoa, how spiritual and overwhelming is it? It's actually sometimes God meeting me there in the silence. It's sometimes God reminding me of something that I've heard before in the past, or something that somebody has reminded me of in the present. And this passage, as I read it, reminded me of how many different spots I've had over a lifetime, and most of them being in this painfully disoriented, that I've done everything in my power to try to hide and escape. And then I discover once again, God's there. There's been so many times that I'm like jumping up and down in this securely oriented space, and I get so excited that I actually forget to acknowledge that God's there. You know what I'm The things ever get so smooth that all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I did this on my own, right? No. I'm in this secure place because what? God was in that space and God created that. Or sometimes, and we've hinted at this through this series, but I want to highlight even more. There's sometimes in this surprisingly reoriented space that, can we be honest, I'm out of painfully disoriented, but surprisingly reoriented feels uncomfortable sometimes because we're not used to it. We're not sure if we believe in it. We're not sure if it's going to last long. Do you know God is in this space as well? Listen to the way the rest of Psalm 139 goes in verses 9 and 10. It says, if I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand should hold me fast. Listen to it and see it visually this way. If we wake up before anyone to beat the morning, God, you're there. If we make our home in the farthest, most isolated ocean to try to get rid of every loud, crazy, busy, annoying APU person ever, even there, you are present and will guide me. Listen to Psalm 139, verses 11 and 12. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. Visually imagine it and hear it differently like this. God, even if I were afraid and isolated and alone, you are there. Even if we are afraid and think to ourselves, the darkness will surely swallow me, you are there. Thank God you are always there and you always find me, even in the darkest place. Psalm 139, you've probably heard a million times, but when you start to actually think about all the places that you hide, that you feel alone, that you feel isolated, if you could read this psalm or put it in your own words and actually have the scriptures remind you once again, we have an all-present God. I know that's complicated in the fleeing moments. I know that's complicated in the running moments. I heard some audible exhales and wow, that's a powerful photo. When you saw the Sarajevo photo from 2004 when a child was being handed over barbed wire because of civil war and everything that was happening there. And if you have a heart, if you have a mind, you probably went, wait, really? God, can you be in spots like that? Psalm 139 and David try to remind us that, yes, even though it doesn't make sense, even though you don't know how long you're going to be stuck and painfully disoriented and when will surprisingly reoriented happen again, Psalm 139 reminds us of what we're not even sure we can believe at moments. Psalm 139 really makes us think about what God could be up to that we could never do on our own. Here's what I want you to do. The Kaleo band's going to come play quietly for a few seconds. And I've actually asked Jake, and by the way, all of media services, all the hard setting up over here, all that they've done with photos and stuff, like they're really fellow preachers with me and they're doing a great job. I've asked Jake to show all those slides, those photos again before they ever put up the lyrics. Could I encourage you to stay seated maybe during the song? To not feel like you have to sing? Maybe in the little bit quieter space that this song will create. Will you ask that question, God, where can I go from your presence? Where can I flee from you? And if you heard the language that was in there, there was all this subtle language of God guiding, God's hand leading, God's presence, getting us to those new places of surprisingly reoriented or even being securely oriented. If you're like me at all, there's probably a couple spots when you see these photos or you process this, you might want to say, God, I'm still having a hard time believing that there's any chance of security because guess what? I got to go home for Thanksgiving and my family is not a secure place. Or maybe you're looking at your grades right now and you realize you got 3 weeks to make up like 90% of a grade, and as you calculate it, you know securely oriented isn't even possible, and you may be asking God, can you help me pull off a surprisingly reoriented moment, right? The only reason you're laughing is because you're nervous about truth, right? This is the devotional moment. Sometimes you guys say we give you way too much information. They're going to play a quieter song on purpose, and don't feel like you have to sing if you don't want. Will you talk to God? Will you talk with God? Will you listen for God? And will you seek the all-present God in every space you could ever imagine? God, would this song help us hear you? God, would these photos help us be reminded where you're at? God, would you work in this quieter space with the lights coming down and hopefully a chance to think, would you do something in us that we never expected tonight in Kaleo? In Jesus' name, amen. You is smart. You is kind. You is important. That little scene in the movie, The Help, where a so-called potential nanny / surrogate mom / voice of God / someone who believes in a little one that nobody else is watching out for, if you've ever seen the movie, just reminded me of this next section. This next section goes into the all-creative God, and I'm not the sharpest tack in the drawer, but I'm smart enough to say it like this: God don't make junk. If we were to read this next section, I would hope and pray that every single person could imagine a God that when he made you, you were one of a kind. That there is beauty, there is something amazing. Listen to what it says in verses 13, 14. For you created my innermost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. How fun would it be if you could wake up in the morning and your roommates would not look at you weird and you go, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Yes. So you're like, what do you had too much coffee in the morning? But Okay, how about 2 hours after you've woken up, maybe you would believe that. Maybe somewhere in there you would believe that. Pastor Janet's going to talk about some of these verses here about the all-creative God, but we thought it'd be fun to do something, and some of you have seen this and some of you haven't. I watched 5 students watch it as we were getting ready, and one said, I've never seen it before, and they were just intrigued, and the other one said, I've seen it in a class, and it's really powerful. But we want you to see what it's like when people realize that others actually see that they're more beautiful than they ever imagined they were on their own. Check out this small little Dove commercial.
As we continue to look into the majesty of our all-creative God, let's continue to reflect on Psalm 139, starting in verse 15. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body, and all the days ordained for me were written in your book, before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you.
Thanks, Ryan. So some devotional thoughts about this section for me as I thought about the verses that we read before of being known and created and wonderfully made, and as I kept reading what we just heard Ryan read to us, there are a lot of thoughts and feelings that come to me when I think about this section. I think about like baby announcements, so like right, because this is like the section that people do like baby announcements, and they like read these verses. Or I think about I think about the moments where I felt very known by a created God. I've thought about moments when I felt really known by others, and I also thought about moments where I felt very misunderstood by people. I also thought about the moments that I want to claim this being fearfully and wonderfully made, but also feel unknown and unseen by other people. And I also thought about the moments that I have felt loved and deeply cared for in the most unlikely places. I remembered a trip that I took last summer to Taiwan, and I actually got to go for like a week and a half, and it was the longest flight of my life. But it was really life-changing in a lot of ways. We did a lot of ministry for a solid week, and there was a night where we actually got to go to a night market, and I love food, so I was so excited. And so this was going to be a night of like buffet, like all you can eat. Like it was just like I was so ready. And so the church that we were partnering with had gathered a couple different family members from their community and their church, and they were going to come and join us to this night market. And so I remember that they paired us off so that we could just kind of wander and have a translator there with us. And so I got paired up with Edward and his family, his wife and his daughter. And I remember we were just walking through, and the moment we started, Edward said, "Janet, what do you want to try?" I was like, "Everything." But what do you recommend? And so he starts pointing at things. He's like, "This is my favorite. This is really good." And I didn't know Edward. I didn't know the family. Like that was the first time I had met them. And I just remember like the moment that I was like, "Yeah, I want to try that. Let's do it." And I was pulling out my wallet, and right away he's like, "No." He's like, "Janet, no, like we want to treat you. Everything tonight we want to buy for you." And I was like, "No, like you can't, like you don't even know me. Like how are you like giving me this generosity?" And I remember trying to like fight Edward and trying to like sneak money over there. And he's like, "No, like this is our gift to you." And I just remember that whole night, like trying to be very cautious of what I said I liked, because if I said I liked it or I had an interest, Edward was buying it for me. Like he was rushing over, or his wife and daughter were going and saying, "Hey, here's some of our favorite things." And there's a picture, I didn't include it, sorry, but there's a picture that at the end of the night, I was just so overwhelmed by this love and generosity of Edward and his family that my arms were like filled with bags of food. Like you can see, like I had like 3 different drinks of different like boba teas that were so good. And like I was just like literally overflowing in my arms with this love and generosity of this family that didn't even know me. And after I left that night, I was overwhelmed by this idea of if this family that were strangers and that became family to me by the end of the night could show me such deep love, how much more this God that knows me and created me and was so intimately woven together by him, how much more is that worth to me? And how does that shape then how I live and how I see into the future? And I know when I look at this verse, and maybe if you have read it, there were different things that stood out to me this time. And as I was talking to one of your other campus pastors, Pastor Leah, we were kind of processing this passage together, and we noticed, we're like, hey, there's actually like a lot of darkness that is talked about in here. And I had never really thought about that, like that there is darkness that is talked about. That I had always kind of read this passage as one that is like fluffy and light and is supposed to leave me feeling like hyper and excited and yes, like I can conquer the world. But there is like darkness that is talked about. And so verse 15, there is hints of darkness, and that my frame was not hidden from you, that I was made in a secret place. You saw my unformed body, like that there is this hidden darkness, tucked away, unknown space. And that there is like this moment that it just clicked to me of how will that impact me to go back to my beginnings of how I was created? How does that impact how I think about my present and my future and all the dark and hidden unknown things that I'm entering into right now? That I don't know what might feel unknown for you if you are freaking out about what classes you're going to take, and that feels unknown. If it feels basic, like I don't even know what I'm going to do this weekend, or if I don't know what I'm going to take for classes. I don't know what life is going to look like when I graduate. I don't know how to deal with this hard thing that has been revealed to me, and how do I enter into this unknown? And so I think for me, what was powerful as I read Psalms 139, verses 13 through 18 again, is that what would it look like to see this God that was intimate, that was intentional in the way that he created me in the beginning in this dark and unknown space, is doing the same thing now. So could it be that the intimate, delicate, purposeful weaving, knitting that was done in us then is being done in us still? And so I think for me that was very powerful as I think about different things that I'm processing that feel unknown, that feel heavy, that I don't even want to touch, that I don't even know how to explain, that I don't even know how to process. There is some powerful truth for me in this passage that says the God who formed me in this dark and hidden place, that saw what I couldn't see, that saw what others couldn't see, gives me hope and encouragement and excitement about entering into these dark and unknown spaces that feel unknown to me in the future. That the God who saw you then sees you now when you might feel in the dark and unknown. I want to quote one of our SALT team members that it was just powerful for me as he was processing this. So Nelson, shout out to you. Because we have this idea when we think about this passage that is very us-focused, that, okay, how do I, again, like there is deep value in you, and I want you to know that you can't see the future with God if you don't see that there is a purpose and intention for you from the beginning. And so as if you might feel fearful in whatever is coming next for you, if you feel unknown. So this is kind of what Nelson said, that God doesn't go where we go. Where we go to, he is already there. So he doesn't go where we go to, he is already there. So know that there is a God that knows what is coming next for you. Not in a creepy, like, withholding way, but like in a, you can trust this. You can trust the one who made you with deep purpose, intention, that he took his time, that there is deep plan for you, that he is doing the same thing in whatever feels unknown, whatever feels broken in your life right now, whatever feels scary for you in the future, that there is still that delicate, intimate, intentional God that is holding it with such care and purpose for your future. So we're going to reflect on that right now. And so whatever that would look like for you, if you need to remember that, if you just need to read this passage again, we're going to have the band sing a song that you can reflect in on. So I'll invite the band. Lord knew. There you go. Bless you. So let me read the passage for you again. How about that? As the band gets ready. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, you saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. And when I wake, I am still with you.
Thanks for good songs. It feels good to exhale and breathe in a little bit. God knows you. God knows me. God knows us. And that's not scary. It's not overwhelming. I can't seem to disappear or hide or run from God. God's out in front of me. There's hope there. Here's what's crazy. Most devotions, most sermons, most everything else says, oh, it's time to pray and be done. But the SALT team and I and the scriptures feel like would be cheating you if you didn't know how crazy the ending of Psalm 139 is. If any of you know what verses 19 through 22 are, just raise your hand. I'm curious if anybody does. Don't worry, I won't pick on you. You don't have to come preach it. How many of you have heard all the verses that we've said, but you're like, wait, there's more? What is it about? Does anybody know what 19 through 22 are? Be ready for a oh my, okay? Because so far in Psalm 139, we've heard that God knows all of our thoughts. God is all present. God is all creative. But there's one more section, and many theologians will go, does it fit here? And then there's others that have really challenged me, said it absolutely fits here. Listen to what it says. If only, God, you would kill the wicked. What? Wait a second. We're just singing that sweet song, and Aston's voice was like, oh. And all of a sudden, it's like slasher, God kill the wicked. It says, if only, God, you would kill the wicked. If only murderers would get away from me. The people who talk about you, but only for wicked schemes. The people who are your enemies, who use your name as if it were of no significance. Don't hate everyone who hates you. Don't I despise those who attack you. Yes, I hate them through and through. They've become my enemies too. Can everybody with me real quick just say, what? Thank you. Okay, you got to get this. Psalm 139, 19 through 22 does something really important. Remember we said God knows our thoughts. God is all present. God is also creative and made us of something of value. And it's almost like right here, it's going all the way back to Psalm 1, Psalm 16, Psalm 91, Psalm 143, where the Psalms are really key about wickedness and righteousness. If some of you are real quick and go, wait a second, The New Testament, Jesus says never to hate your enemies. You're right. It says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 41, love for your enemies. That God basically says through Jesus, you have heard it said, but Jesus says, but you're supposed to love your enemies. But if you remember what Psalm 139 verses 19 through 22 said, it's talking about a particular way. It's talking about a movement. It's talking about wickedness. Let me put it this way. I've gone to school just like you have. I grew up in public schools and went to a Christian university, and it was interesting because of what I remember happening at Webster Elementary School and some other spots. And was like, sometimes we get so used just trying to be all good with everybody. We remember lines out of Nacho Libre like, why are you judging me, right? And like all of a sudden wickedness and everything kind of becomes this, everything's just neutral, everything's all okay. Do you realize what's crazy about the end of this passage? It is saying that there are those out there that want to absolutely step on, squash, ruin, and destroy those main themes that we just mentioned. A God that knows all our thoughts, a God that is always present, a God who is creative and have made you amazing. What this passage is saying is basically, if you are in spaces, locations, and moments where you see wickedness destroying all those things that were just said about others, said about you, said about God's people, said about God. The language in there is basically saying, God, they are calling out murderous whatevers about you. They're using your name incorrectly. That what I love about the Psalms is it gives space for you to be honest. God, would the wicked just go away? This is difficult. God, with the wicked that are against you, that impacts me, this is heavy. I don't feel valued. I don't feel created beautifully. I don't feel like my feelings matter. I don't feel like you're present. What the end of Psalm 139 does is it says it's okay to be honest when none of those other things feel true. Now, if some of you are like, yeah, forget what Jesus said at the Sermon on the Mount. Psalm 139 just said, I could hate those that hate God, and I can call out murderous ways and everything else. Listen to the last verse. It says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. What I like about Psalm 139 is it says God knows our thoughts, God is always present, God is creative, and we aren't junk. And it says, and there's going to be moments that people, others, movements, it was weird to hear all the list of things that the SALT team named that would fit into this category, that when wickedness is out to destroy, we want it to go away. And then it comes back at the very end and says, but be careful, make sure that the same wickedness isn't in you and how you navigate and do that. God, know me and search me. If you've never heard Psalm 139 all the way through, it not only talks about the hope-filled places where God's out, but it also talks about the miserable, difficult spaces that life really acts like. And in that, do we become the wickedness that we wish would go away? Search my heart, O God. Point out any wicked way within me so that I also am not like those that are against the way of God. Good luck with that. May God give wisdom and strength that we don't become what we hate so much. And may Jesus do something new inside of us so that we may be a part of loving our neighbor even when we haven't been loved this way. Here's what I want to do. I want to give you freedom. I want to pray over you, and I want to tell you that this amazing, we don't know who they are because they're standing on the floor and we can't see them and it's not about them. This band has these 2 songs they want you to sing with freedom and hope if that's helpful, or if the best thing you could ever do is go study that you can do that, but you can't leave till I have permission to pray over you. As the band comes up and as you stand, I want to pray for you that 139 actually gets lived out on you. We stand? God, tonight I have needed this space to reflect on all things in Psalm 139, not just the things I like or want to hear about. God, for the student here who does not feel like they are smart, they are kind, they are intelligent, they are valued, would your love do that? God, for the student that feels like your presence is nowhere and they're all alone, or even the student that wants to run from you and run from everybody else, God, would you be there? God, for those that feel like we're being bulldozed by wickedness, would wickedness not rise up in us where we became the same problem and destruction that is happening in this world? God, would you save the world, but save me first, because I'm probably a big part of the problem. God, I pray that those that need to get out of here and go study would be able to do that. Those that need to sing more and talk to you more would do that. And God, would you help us for the next week and a half before it's turkey time? In Jesus' name, amen.